Have you ever felt like someone or something was watching you? Even when you were completely alone? Out in the empty desert, where the air turns cold and every sound feels alive, ancient legends speak of creatures that wear the faces of men, but are anything but human. Welcome to Scary Dark Narrations. And tonight, we're diving deep into 7 most disturbing Skinwalker horror stories that will terrify you. They say Skinwalkers are more than myths. In the vast emptiness of the American Southwest, people have seen figures running on all fours, faster than any animal should. Voices echoing from the dark, mimicking loved ones long gone. Faces twisting, bones cracking, eyes glowing from the shadows. Every culture has its monsters. But these creatures, these things, are whispered about in fear, never spoken of lightly. Locals refuse to go out after sunset. Ranchers leave entire properties abandoned overnight. Even Navajo elders who know these stories better than anyone warn never speak their name after dark. Tonight, we'll explore 7 encounters so terrifying they've left witnesses scarred for life. Real stories of people who saw the impossible, who heard footsteps outside their windows when no one was there, who watched a familiar figure call their name only to realize it wasn't human at all. These tales are not for the faint of heart, so dim the lights, put on your headphones, and don't look out the window, because once you hear them, you'll never feel safe in the dark again. Now, let's begin. 7 most disturbing Skinwalker horror stories that will terrify you. The forest in southern Sweden had always felt different, quieter, heavier somehow, as if the trees held their breath when you walked by. I was 12 that summer, and my older brother Eric was 15, fearless, loud, and the kind of kid who thought fear was something people made up to keep things interesting. We were staying at our grandparents' cabin on a large island, a place so isolated that only one other cabin sat almost a mile away. To most people, it was paradise. But for me, it always felt like the woods were watching. The first morning, the air was thick with that fresh pine scent that usually made me feel calm. We were planning to fish, our favorite routine when visiting. We'd set up our rods, pack the bait box. Now all that was left was to dig for worms behind the cabin, down the short slope, and through the narrow trail that cut into the dense woods. I remember thinking how dark it was, how the branches blocked almost all sunlight. Soil there was always damp, and the silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. We grabbed the shovel and a bucket and started digging. At first it was normal, the wet sound of metal hitting soil, the distant lapping of the lake. Then I heard it, footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. My shovel froze mid-swing, and I looked at Eric. He caught my expression, but just rolled his eyes. "Probably a deer," he whispered. Still he looked uneasy, scanning the trees ahead. We followed the sound further down the trail, toward a clearing I'd been to before with Mom, where mushrooms grew near the edge of the meadow. Just before we reached the open area, Eric raised his hand to stop me. Froze. Behind the trees, something was standing, tall, massive. A moose. I exhaled, almost laughing with relief. But Eric didn't move. His face had drained of all color. His eyes wide, terrified, locked onto mine as he said quietly, "We need to go. Now." He didn't wait for me to answer. He pushed me back, urging me faster. I could hear how shallow his breathing was, how off it felt. When we reached the cabin, we were nearly running. Mom and Grandma were sitting on the porch when we arrived. I tried to explain, babbling about the moose, but Eric stayed completely silent, his lips pressed tight, eyes unfocused. There was no fishing that day. No one asked why. The next morning, the air felt heavier. My brother hadn't spoken much since the sighting. He just sat on the couch, flipping through a magazine without turning a page. I tried to read too, but my mind kept drifting back to the woods. When Grandpa asked where the shovel was, I realized we'd left it behind. He stood to go get it, but Mom stopped him, said it was our mess to clean up. She wanted us to grab some worms too, since we might go fishing later. Eric's face changed, not angry, not afraid, exactly, but resigned, like he knew something I didn't. We put on our shoes and stepped into the woods again. The same damp air greeted us, the same unnatural silence. My brother lagged behind this time. When we reached the clearing, the shovel was still there, half buried in the dirt. told me to dig, said he'd done it last time. His voice was steady, but I could tell he didn't want to go any closer. I dug quickly, trying to ignore the feeling creeping up my spine. The forest felt different now, like it was listening. Then came the rustling, soft at first, and heavier, branches brushing. I looked up, but there was no wind, just that sound, moving around me, circling. Every few seconds it shifted direction like something was pacing, unseen. My hands trembled as I filled the bucket with worms. I could feel eyes on me, like something just beyond sight was leaning closer. "Let's go," Eric whispered sharply, stepping forward to help me close the bucket. His tone left no room for argument. We turned to leave, and that's when I heard it. Crack. A branch snapping close behind us. I turned. The world went still. It was there again at the end of the trail. The moose. But this time, it wasn't right. Its frame was too thin, its limbs too long. It wasn't standing on four legs. It was hunched, like a man stooped forward under invisible weight, its front limbs' arms hanging limply. The antlers twisted at strange angles, and its eyes. They didn't shine like an animal's. They glowed with something cold. I couldn't move, could only stare as its head tilted slightly too far, and a whisper brushed across my thoughts. A voice that wasn't mine. "Ick, let me help you." The words felt like they were inside me, not spoken but inserted. I gasped, stumbling back. Eric grabbed my arm, pulling me hard. We ran. Branches whipped our faces, our feet pounding through the dirt. I turned once, but it was gone. We burst through the clearing and up the slope, hearts hammering. The cabin came into view, sunlight cutting through the trees like salvation. When we reached the porch, I dropped the bucket beside Grandma's chair. She looked up, puzzled. Eric said nothing, and silence swallowed everything. 6 years passed before I spoke of it again. I'd grown older, moved away, tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a moose distorted by fear and fog. But then, one night, scrolling through Facebook, I saw my grandmother's name. She still stayed at the cabin every summer. Against better judgment, I messaged her, told her about that day, about the twisted moose, the voice, the way Eric and I had never gone back. It took her 15 minutes to reply. When she finally did, her message came in one long block of text, Swedish, filled with typos from shaky hands. She told me she'd seen it too. 20 years earlier, before Grandpa retired, she had stayed there alone. One night she'd woken up with the unmistakable feeling of being watched. The cabin had no neighbors, no phones, and the nearest village was miles across water. She'd tried to ignore it, curling back under the blanket until the sound came. Slow, deliberate thuds from outside. Not walking, dragging. Something large brushing against the wall. She delit a candle and crept to the front window, but couldn't bring herself to open the curtains. She said she knew something was there, waiting. The noises stopped, so she tried to go back to sleep. But just as her eyes closed, she heard it again from the back wall, this time near the old abandoned cabin that used to stand behind theirs. She described the dread exactly as I remembered it. Thick, pressing, intelligent. She couldn't resist anymore. She pulled the curtain aside and froze. A face stared back, not a person's, not an animal's. Its body was thin and contorted, its limbs bent wrong, its antlers splayed like skeletal hands. But the worst part, she said, was the feeling that it wanted her to open the door. "Let me help you," it seemed to whisper. She'd fainted. When she woke at sunrise, the thing was gone. But the prints in the dirt weren't moose tracks. They were longer, almost human. As I read her words, I felt cold seep through my body. Eric and I hadn't imagined it. It was real, and it had been there long before us. Grandma said she'd told Mom and Grandpa back then, but they'd brushed it off. Maybe that's why she never mentioned it again. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, the twisted shape, the way it leaned forward, like it wanted to whisper something only I could hear. I looked up images of Wendigos and Skinwalkers online, and my stomach turned when I saw how close the resemblance was. But one thought haunted me more than any of that. Something Grandma said near the end of her message. She wrote, "It didn't look angry, it looked patient. I haven't gone back to Sweden since. Either has Eric. But sometimes when I call him, there is a pause before he speaks, as if he's listening for something else on the line. And sometimes, when I walk near wooded parks at dusk, I catch glimpses in the corner of my eye. Tall shapes, still and waiting. If that thing really was what we think it was, maybe it never left that island, or maybe it learned to follow. Would you dare return to that cabin? The wind scraped against my window that night, a cold December whisper curling through the tiny gap I'd left open. It was the night before Christmas Eve, and Dorset felt lonelier than ever. I was back in my childhood bedroom, the one that used to smell faintly of dust and sea salt, in the same house my parents bought cheap after the old owner had died. They said he passed peacefully in his sleep. I never asked in which room. My friend had left earlier that day to spend the holidays with his family. For a week, he and I had played games, walked the dog, and talked about nothing in particular, just to adults, pretending the world outside didn't exist. When he left, the silence filled the walls like a presence, heavier than I remembered. I went to bed early, hoping to sleep through the stillness. Around 9 p.m., I shut off the light, leaving the window cracked for a cool breeze. Sleep didn't come easy. I drifted in and out, half awake, half lost in those uneasy half-dreams, where you re-aware you re-dreaming but can pull yourself free. It must have been around midnight when I finally slipped under. That's when the dream began. In it, I wasn't myself. I saw through someone else's eyes, someone moving through my neighborhood, creeping through the shadows. Their vision glided soundlessly across the damp grass, slipping past fences and hedges like mist. My perspective drifted toward my garden, where my sister's dog lay curled beneath the tree. Then I saw it. A pale, human-shaped thing, moving too smoothly, climbing my house like a spider without limbs. It reached my open window, and God help it look straight at me. That's when I woke up. My skin was slick with sweat, my heart pounding against my ribs, like it wanted out. For a long moment, I didn't move. The only sound was the wind outside, pushing through the trees. I told myself it was just a dream. That's what dreams do, right? They crawl under your skin, whisper nonsense, and then fade away. But this one didn't fade. Sharp barks shattered the silence. My sister's dog feral, frantic. Then a yelp, a nothing. The quiet afterward was suffocating. I stared at the ceiling, every muscle stiff. That's when I heard it, a slow, deliberate scratching sound against the wooden paneling outside my window. Not the scuttle of a branch or the patter of rain, something alive, climbing. I wanted to look, but some part of Mitha, old animal part, refused to move. My hand found the clock beside me. 3:33 a.m. exactly. The numbers burned gold in the dark, like they knew something I didn't. That was when the fear hit, pure, primal, paralyzing. Wasn't just that something might be outside, it was that something was already inside. I could feel it. The air felt heavier, charged. I tried to convince myself it was a dream again, but then I heard it. A low, murmuring sound, like whispers buried underwater. I opened my eyes, just a sliver. Something moved across the ceiling, a shape, a darker shadow than the dark itself. Duff. It slid, slow and soundless, until it hovered above the light fixture. Eyes. I shut my eyes tight, my breath trembling. I don't know why I didn't scream. I don't know why I didn't move. It was like my body wasn't my own anymore. Then came the light. Even through closed eyelids, a blinding white flash filled the room. Sound like hundreds of lighters sparking at once, crackled through the air. It was so bright, so sharp, that it felt as if the world itself had gone silent in shock. And then nothing, darkness. I sat up fast, my chest heaving. My hand reached for the bedside lamp. It wouldn't turn on. I remembered unplugging it earlier for my friend's charger. My eyes adjusted slowly, and that's when I saw it. A figure stood perfectly still in the center of the room. Its body was tall, wrong, too slender, and completely black, so black it absorbed the light around it. It turned its head, slow and mechanical, the motion stuttering like broken film. And though I couldn't see a face, I felt it looking at me. It didn't move, neither did I. For what felt like forever, the only sound in the room was my pulse thundering in my ears. My throat burned with the urge to scream, but no sound came out. The thing stood under the light fixture, motionless, its head tilted slightly, as if studying me. Then it twitched. It's not a normal movement, more like a puppet's jerk when its strings are pulled too hard. It took a single step forward, its limbs bending just a little too far in the wrong directions. The floorboards didn't creak. The air didn't shift. It was like it wasn't really there, but somehow more real than anything I'd ever seen. I wanted to run.
Ow.
I wanted to shut my eyes and vanish. But I couldn't. My mind screamed move, yet my body stayed frozen, trembling. Its hand rose long, pale fingers stretching toward me, impossibly thin, the nails tapering into something between claws and bone. The closer it got, the colder the air became, like all the warmth in the room was being pulled into it. Do you know that moment when fear becomes physical? When it feels like your heart might tear itself apart just to escape your body? That was me. When its hand reached my face, something inside me broke. I lunged out of bed, slammed my hand against the wall switch, flooding the room with light, and just like that, moved. In less than a heartbeat, it crossed the room, twisted its body through the open window, and leaped into the night. I swear it didn't fall, it flew or glided, vanishing over the garden in a blur of motion. I stood there, gasping, staring at the empty window, the curtains flapping in the cold wind. I didn't think, I just ran. Down the hall, down the stairs, calling for my parents. No answer. The house was dead quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and my own uneven breaths. When I stepped into the backyard, the night felt wrong. The air carried no sound, no wind, no distant cars, nothing. Just stillness. The dog was crouched by the tree, trembling, whining softly. Knelt beside it, and when it looked at me, its eyes were wide and wet, like it had seen something it could never unsee. I stayed awake the rest of the night, the light on, my back against the wall. Every flicker of shadow made my stomach knot. Every creak made me think it had come back. The next morning, I searched the outside wall beneath my window. There were scratches, deep ones, etched into the wood like talons had dragged down it. My parents said it was probably just a bird or the wind, but there were too many marks. It's too high up in the window screen, torn clean through. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring out into the fields, daring it to return. Midnight passed. 1 o'clock. 2. The silence felt heavier again, pressing against the glass. Then I saw it, faint white glow, moving along the edge of the garden. It wasn't a shape not yet, but a shimmer, a distortion like the air itself was bending. Then it turned. 2 glints of white eyes or reflections stared straight back at me. I shut the curtains, heart hammering, but I could still see it behind my eyelids, burned into the dark. I don't know how long I sat there before the fear gave way to exhaustion. When dawn broke, I looked again. Nothing. The yard was empty. It's been months since that night, and I still can't shake the memory. Some nights when I wake at 3:33, I feel that same presence, the heavy air, the static hum, the sense that I'm not alone. Maybe it never left. Maybe it's waiting. Would you dare sleep with your window open tonight? I've never been the kind to scare easily. Horror movies, creepy games, even those so-called real ghost stories online, none of them ever got to me. Fear always felt like something distant, something that belonged to someone else. But that changed a few nights ago. Now I can't close my eyes without hearing the scrape of something against glass, something that shouldn't be there. My girlfriend and I live in a cabin deep in the woods, far from the nearest road. The air smells like pine and damp soil, and at night, the silence stretches for miles. We only have 2 cats, Luna and Ash. Luna sleeps in our room, curled at the foot of the bed like a small guardian. Ash prefers to wander after dark, disappearing into the trees until morning. It's a peaceful life, or at least it used to be. That night, I was up late in the living room, the TV flickering with some awful B movie. It was around 1 in the morning, and my girlfriend was already asleep. I was just starting to drift off when I heard it, a faint thunk from the back of the house. It was the cat door. We installed an electronic chip reader, so only our cats could use it. I figured Ash was back from his nightly adventure, probably bumping it on his way in. Then it happened again. Thunk. Louder this time. Then again. A strange rhythmic knocking, like something testing the flap instead of passing through it. I muted the TV, my pulse quickening a little. The sound came at random intervals, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp, like claws tapping plastic. I sighed, thinking Ash had caught a mouse and couldn't fit through. As I stood, I glanced into the bedroom. My girlfriend was still fast asleep, her breathing steady. But Luna. She was sitting upright on the bed, ears pinned back, staring at the window. Not moving, not blinking, just staring. "Luna," I whispered. She didn't even flick her tail. A chill crept under my skin, but I shrugged it off. Probably a squirrel or raccoon outside, I told myself. Still, when I stepped into the kitchen, the air felt colder, as if someone had left the freezer open. The back door had a frosted glass panel, just enough to blur whatever stood behind it. And through that haze, I saw movement. A dark shape crouched low. I assumed it was Ash, and reached for the handle. The door was stiff from the cold. It took a second to pull open, just enough time for the shape to move. When it did, my heart lurched. It bolted the moment the door cracked, darting into the tree line in a blur. Not a cat, not even close. It moved too fast, limbs too long, the shape too wrong. For a split second I saw something like a tail. But it wasn't quite a tail, more like an extra joint bent at the wrong angle. I slammed the door shut, locking it without thinking. My breath came in sharp bursts. Maybe it was Ash, I tried to reason. Maybe the dark made it look bigger. Maybe then I looked down. Ash was asleep on the rug, curled up in the warmth of the firelight. The realization hit me so hard my legs almost gave out. Whatever was outside wasn't one of my cats. I stood there for a long time. Every sound in the cabin magnified the ticking clock. The wind brushing the porch, the faint hum of the fridge. I finally forced myself to bed, crawling in beside my girlfriend. She mumbled something in her sleep, turned over. Luna hadn't moved from the window. Her eyes were still fixed outside. It took forever to fall asleep. But when I did, something woke me again hours later. Something wrong. The kind of dread that comes before you even know why you're afraid. The air felt heavier. I could hear slow, deliberate creaking near the bedroom door. Not the scurry of paws, but the soft, careful weight of footsteps. I held my breath, straining to listen. The floorboards moaned. Then a shadow fell across the crack under the door, thin, shifting, standing still. I reached for the lamp beside me, my hand shaking just slightly. When the light clicked on, the world froze. There, in the doorway, was it. Then silence swallowed everything. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, framed in the soft light, its body half hidden by the doorframe. It wasn't tall, maybe 5 feet, but its proportions were wrong. The arms hung too low, the neck angled unnaturally, like something trying to mimic a human shape, but not built for it. My voice caught in my throat. I couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. Then as my eyes adjusted, I saw its face. It looked like a dog, but not. The muzzle was too long, the skin stretched thin, twitching as it breathed. And the eyes, God, the eyes, they were human. Not just human, but aware, watching, smiling. What the hell? The words barely made it out before it snarled. That distorted, guttural sound, part growl, part laugh. I shouted, stumbling backward, dragging the sheets with me. My girlfriend jerked awake, screaming at the sight. The creature twitched, then it ran. It moved with horrifying speed, its limbs bending the wrong way as it sprinted down the hall. The sound of its footsteps was like bare hands slapping wood, fast, uneven, to human. I leapt out of bed, grabbing the shotgun from beneath the frame. The adrenaline cut through the fog of sleep. I could hear it moving through the kitchen, then past the back door. The moment I reached the window, it flashed by outside. Just a blur of movement, a silhouette breaking through the moonlight. What was that? My girlfriend cried, clutching the sheets to her chest. I don't know, I managed, loading the shotgun. Stay here. The back door was open. I'd forgotten to lock it earlier. The cold air spilled in, and for a moment, I thought I saw something standing just beyond the porch, in the tree line. Watching. I stepped out barefoot onto the cold wood. The forest loomed silent. Even the insects had stopped. The moonlight barely reached the ground, but I could feel it, that presence. Like eyes hidden behind every shadow, then came the sound, a wet shuffle, low and dragging. From the darkness between the trees, 2 faint reflections stared back at me. Not the bright, animal gleam of eyes, but dull, deep, like old glass. "Get away from here," I yelled, firing a warning shot into the dirt. The echo thundered through the forest, but the figure didn't flinch. It tilted its head, slow, deliberate, before sinking back into the darkness, step by step, until it vanished. I stood there until my body stopped shaking. Then I shut the door, locked it, and double-checked every window in the house. My girlfriend didn't speak the rest of the night. Neither did I. We never saw it again, not directly. But sometimes, when the wind's still and the moonlight hits the yard just right, I see footprints by the back steps, not cat prints, not human either. Long, narrow, wrong. Now I make sure every door is locked, every light checked, every sound accounted for. I sleep earlier than I used to, because I don't ever want to be awake when that thing decides to come back. People online told me it sounded like a skinwalker, but I don't think it was. Because sometimes, late at night, when Luna starts staring out the window again, I hear something soft and rhythmic tapping against the glass, like it's trying to get back in. Would you dare return to this place? The fog is back tonight. It's pressing against my windows, thick and unnatural, rolling in from the tree line like it knows my name. I can hear them again, those things that shouldn't exist, circling my house, whispering through the night air. But before I tell you what's happening now, I need to start from the beginning. Because this didn't begin tonight. It began when I was 8 years old, on the night I lost my dog. That summer evening was warm and lazy. One of those days that felt endless. My friends had just left after my birthday party. The smell of cake and burnt-out candles still lingered. I was in the backyard, holding my Spider-Man figure, feeling safe, invincible. Until Johnny, my Siberian husky, stiffened, growled, and bolted straight into the woods behind our house. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone, swallowed by the trees. I remember calling for him, my voice breaking. That's when the fog came thick, gray, and rolling fast across the yard like it had a purpose. It wasn't normal fog. It moved too heavy, too alive. Through it, I saw a shape. Stood completely still tall, human-shaped, but off. Then came a howl. At first, it sounded like a wolf, but halfway through, something changed. It cracked, twisted, and became something almost human. I screamed for my dad, came running, shotgun in hand, eyes wide with fear before I even spoke. When I told him what I'd seen, he said, "Son, there are no wolves in this country." He ushered me inside, his voice trembling as he locked the doors. That night, he sat awake on the couch, gripping his shotgun until dawn. When the first light hit the windows, I saw it in his eyes. He hadn't slept because he knew something was out there. From that night on, every evening brought fog. Would roll across our yard at exactly the same time, thick enough to hide shapes moving inside it. My dad never talked about it, but I caught him muttering prayers under his breath when the howling started. By the time I was 13, the noises felt closer. Sometimes it sounded like Johnny, his exact bark right outside my window. But Johnny was gone. One winter night, my dad finally broke the silence. We were sitting by the fireplace when he said, "Son, there's something I need to tell you." His voice was low, like he was afraid the walls were listening. Long before men ruled the earth, other creatures walked it. When we came, they were forced into the shadows. But some stayed. He took a deep breath. They're called skinwalkers, shapeshifters. They wear the bodies of others like clothes. They take your memories, your voice, your life. The only way you can tell it's them, there's always something wrong with their voice. Something. Hollow. He slid a red leather-bound book across the table. "No title, no author. Read it," he said. "You'll need it." Inside were handwritten pages filled with drawings, symbols, and stories people who'd seen the same creatures. Notes about salt, silver, holy water, how to recognize them, how to survive. I read that book cover to cover until the pages felt burned into my brain. Then, when I turned 20, my father left. Said he was moving to the city. I think he just couldn't take it anymore. Before leaving, he looked back at the house and whispered, "Keep the light burning, son." I did. For years, nothing happened, until last week. It started with the fog again. I saw it rolling across the field from my window, heavy and deliberate. My heart sank. Then came the howls, not one this time, 5. The sound made the windows tremble. I grabbed the shotgun, checked the shell salt and silver rounds, just like the book said. I was done being scared. I decided to hunt it. That night, I prepared everything. Sprinklers filled with holy water, salt spread along the windowsills, symbols carved into the doors. I even loaded my sniper rifle silver-tipped bullets, each one etched with a protection rune from my father's book. I wasn't just waiting anymore. I was inviting it in. At 10 o'clock sharp, the fog rolled in, thick as smoke. Shadows darted between the trees. Then it appeared a figure at the edge of the light, tall and hunched. It howled again, shaking my bones. I turned the sprinklers on. The thing screamed, the sound warping from beast to human, from human to something else entirely. My hands trembled as I fired. The first bullet hit it, dropped to the ground. I didn't think, didn't breathe, ran toward it. The fog swirled around me, cold and wet, like fingers brushing my face. I reached the body. It wasn't a body at all, but a shape, shifting and twitching, as if deciding what to become next. I dragged it inside, down into my basement. It weighed more than 300 pounds, but I managed. I strapped it into a steel chair, inside a cage wired with electricity, and my heart wouldn't stop pounding. I waited. When it woke, the first thing it did was howl. Then its face began to change, just bones cracking, skin rippling, until I was staring into the eyes of my best friend. My dead best friend. I stepped back, breath caught in my throat. Then silence swallowed everything. It stayed quiet for a long time, just breathing through broken teeth. Then it smiled. "Amen," it said, using my friend's exact voice but wrong, hollow, like someone mimicking emotion they didn't understand. I didn't answer, I just stared. Its eyes darted around the room, studying the bars, the wires, me. Then it laughed. A dry, cracking laugh that echoed in my skull. "You can't stop it," it whispered. "You think there's only one?" My stomach dropped. It shifted again, its flesh bending like melting wax until its face became my father's. "You left the light burning," it said in his voice. "Good boy." I fired the shotgun point blank through the cage. The blast threw it back, smoke filling the basement. But when the air cleared, it was still there, bleeding, yes, but grinning. "That hurt," it rasped. "Do it again." For a second I thought I heard more voices upstairs, scratching, tapping at the walls. I climbed halfway up the stairs and froze. Outside the window, 5 figures stood in the fog, all still, all facing the house. I ran back down and flipped the power to the electric cage. Sparks shot through the bars. The thing convulsed, howling so loud I felt it in my teeth. But over its screams I heard others answering from outside. They were coming. I bolted to the bunker door behind the furnace. My father built it years ago, stocked with food, ammo, and concrete walls. As I sealed it shut, the first impact hit upstairs. Glass shattered, wood splintered, then silence again. I sat in the dim light, the air thick with dust and fear. My mind raced back through everything: the book, my father's warnings, the look in his eyes when he left. He knew this day would come. He'd been running from it all along. Hours passed. Then scraping. Slow, deliberate, right outside the steel door. A voice called my name. My father's voice. "Son, open up." My throat tightened. I pressed my ear to the metal. "You're not him," I whispered. The voice laughed softly. "Then who am I?" The light in the bunker flickered. I grabbed the shotgun and aimed at the door. The steel dented once. Twice. The third time, Mitt buckled. I fired. The sound was deafening in the small room. Dust rained from the ceiling, but something was wrong. The wall behind me groaned as if something massive was pressing against it from the other side. Then came the sound I feared most, the howling. Not one, not two, dozens. They'd surrounded the house again. I climbed onto the ladder to the small escape hatch. Through the narrow slit, I saw shapes circling in the fog, human shapes, animal shapes, some crawling, some standing, all shifting between forms like smoke, trying to find a body. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the gun. I knew I couldn't fight them all, but I also couldn't let them reach anyone else. I triggered the explosives my father had buried beneath the old oak tree, the last resort. The detonator light blinked red. My thumb hovered over the switch. Then, from the fog, I saw movement, a figure walking toward the house. It looked like me. Same height, same clothes, same necklace glinting in the dim light. It stopped and raised its hand and smiled. I froze. My heart was a drumbeat in my ears. The figure mouthed something, 3 words I couldn't hear, but somehow understood. We never left. The light blinked faster. I closed my eyes. If anyone finds this, I whispered into the recorder, be ready. They're still out there. The fog pressed tighter against the glass. The last thing I remember was the sound of claws on metal. Then everything went dark. Would you dare return to this place? It started with a noise that didn't belong to any living thing I knew. A deep, trembling sound that rolled through the walls like thunder wrapped in a human breath. I'd fallen asleep on the couch halfway through a renovation project that left my bedroom stripped bare. Outside, the storm had slowed to a moody wind brushing the eaves. It was close to 1 a.m. when that sound pulled me out of sleep, not violently, but like a cold hand gently touching my chest. The air felt heavier than before, the kind of thickness that makes every sound sharper. For a moment, I thought it was a coyote. But coyotes yip. They don't moan like that. This was long, deep, and hollow, a single drawn-out tone that seemed to bend as it carried. It reminded me of a foger. What a foghorn could breathe. I sat up, heartbeat slamming in my ears, and listened. The noise stretched again, low and guttural, and this time I knew it was coming from right outside my living room window. Out here, near the Ozark Mountains, silence has its own weight. I've lived my whole life along this stretch of forest, right where the Trail of Tears once cut through the land. I've seen bears, deer, cougars, and everything in between. Nature here is wild, unpredictable, but it's honest. Whatever was out there that night wasn't. The sound had something human hiding inside it, and that's what scared me most. I didn't move for nearly a minute, just sat there, staring at the dark window. The old trees outside swayed against the dim light of the porch lamp, and for an instant I thought I saw something, a shadow crossing between the trees, long-limbed and slow, the kind of shape your mind fights to define. I stood, my knees weak, and made my way to my bedroom. There was another window that faced the same direction, and I figured if I needed to see whatever it was, better from a distance. My bare feet felt cold against the wooden floor. The wind pressed softly against the walls, making the house creak like an old ship. When I reached my bedroom, I peered out into the darkness. Nothing. Only the thin outline of branches clawing the air. I waited, breathing slowly. Then, as I turned back toward the door, a thud. Not loud enough to break glass, but sharp enough to make me freeze mid-step. It sounded like the flat slap of a hand, a human hand, against the living room window ID just left behind. I didn't check. I didn't want to see a face staring back at me through that curtain. My instincts told me not to. I stood there for what felt like hours, every nerve awake. The wind picked up, whispering against the siding, but the sound never came again that night. I forced myself back to the couch, buried under a blanket like a child, and eventually drifted into a shallow, nervous sleep. When morning came, sunlight spilled across the floor, soft and golden, as if nothing had happened. But my stomach twisted when I thought about the noise, that voice-like cry echoing in the dark. I told myself I'd imagined it, a trick of the storm. Yet deep down, I knew better. That night, the sound returned. It came later this time, closer to 2 a.m, just when I'd begun to believe it was all in my head. The same dragging tone, the same inhuman depth that made the walls vibrate. My pulse spiked, reached for my phone, thumb trembling against the screen, ready to record proof. But as soon as I pressed record, the sound stopped, dead silence. I waited. Nothing. I stopped recording, and it began again. The pattern repeated. Sound when I listened, silence when I tried to capture it. That's when the fear sank deeper into something primal. Like it knew what I was doing, like it didn't want to be heard by anyone else. I didn't sleep at all that night. Just lay still, eyes open, waiting for the dawn. Then, silence swallowed everything. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep pretending. I had to see what was out there. The storm had moved on, leaving the air damp and heavy with the smell of pine and wet earth. Sunlight filtered through the trees, broken into thin shafts of gold. I stepped into the backyard, and everything felt wrong. The air was too still. Even the birds were quiet. The first thing I noticed were the branches snapped and scattered like something had moved through them carelessly. Not fallen by wind, but ripped. My bonfire pit, the one I'd used a few weeks back, had been disturbed. The ashes were cold and wet, but someone or something had dug through them, not with paws, not with claws. The marks were wide, fingered, like hands. I crouched down and touched the edge of the pit. The dirt felt cool, freshly turned. My throat tightened as I looked deeper. The ashes weren't just dug through, they'd been shaped. Carved into something resembling a circle, with small grooves radiating outward, like crude symbols etched by a child's hand. That's when the wind shifted, bringing with it a faint, low hum. I froze. The same tone I'd heard before, but now it was softer, distant, almost inside my head. I looked toward the tree line, where the forest thickens, and for a brief second, I saw movement tall, too tall to be human. The figure moved between the trees, slow and deliberate, each step unnatural, as though its limbs bent wrong. Back inside, slammed the door, locked every bolt. My chest heaved as I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. But I hadn't. I could still hear it faint, somewhere near the back window. I thought about calling someone, the sheriff, maybe a neighbor. But out here, the nearest house is half a mile away. And what would I even say? That something human but not human was humming in my backyard. As the day wore on, exhaustion pulled at me. I hadn't eaten, barely moved. Dawes. The hum lingered just beneath the edge of hearing, like a vibration in the air itself. When night fell again, I sat in the dark, phone in hand, determined to catch it this time. Then came a knock. 3 soft taps on the glass behind me. I didn't move. My breath caught as I slowly turned my head. The curtains rippled slightly, though no wind moved inside. I stood, inching closer, heart pounding. My reflection stared back from the dark window then. For the briefest second, I saw another shape behind it. A pale outline, human, but not quite. The face was wrong. 2 long eyes that glowed faintly like dying embers. And then it smiled. The noise erupted again, louder than before, vibrating through my bones. It wasn't outside anymore. It was inside the house. The walls seemed to pulse with it. I stumbled backward, tripped, crashed into a chair. The lights flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw movement crawling along the ceiling, shadowed limbs stretching toward me, melting into the dark. Then silence. I stayed frozen for a long time before I realized I'd been holding my breath. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. By dawn, everything was quiet again, as though nothing had happened. But when I looked outside, the ashes were gone, every bit of them. In their place, carved into the dirt, was a single word I didn't recognize. Not English, not any language I knew. I did some digging online later that day, native legends, folklore around this land. The word I saw matched a description in a story about shapeshifters, creatures that wear the faces of men and the voices of animals. They're said to walk the old trails, drawn to those who listen for them. And last night, just before I went to bed, I thought I heard it again, the low, drawn-out tone. Faint but clear. Coming from inside the walls, would you dare return to this place? It started with the sound of crickets. It's the kind that fills the silence of a rural Michigan night until it doesn't. I still remember that night last September. The air cold enough to sting, the kind of chill that made every breath feel like inhaling frost. I was leaving my best friend's farmhouse after a late get-together. They lived out near an old stretch of farmland that, according to locals, dated back to Native American territory. There was even a nearby dirt road called Indian Trail. The name always gave me a strange feeling, like history still lingered there, quietly watching. Their yard was wide and uneven, dotted with rusted tools, old cars, and a massive evergreen tree near the front. That tree had always bothered me. It stood taller than the house, its shadow cutting the yard like a scar. Nobody ever parked near it. Maybe because of the way the hanging yard light made its needles shimmer like something breathing beneath them. My car was parked on the farthest left side of the U-shaped driveway, right next to that tree. As I stepped outside, I noticed how still everything had become. Even the bugs had stopped their endless chorus. I shrugged it off, blaming the hour to 1:30 a.m. My boots crunched over the gravel as I crossed the yard. The house light behind me faded, and I was swallowed by the dim, amber glow from the lone hanging bulb over the evergreen. Then it hit me. My heart began pounding fast out of nowhere. It wasn't nerves, it was panic, sharp and primal, flooding every inch of me. My instinct screamed run. I didn't question it. I broke into a sprint, boots slamming against the cold earth, breath tearing through my chest. I didn't even look back. By the time I reached my car, I was trembling so hard I could barely get the key into the door. Inside, the windows were fogged over from the temperature drop. I started the engine, the low rumble echoing in my chest. A small patch of glass began to clear at the bottom of the windshield, and through that thin, perfect oval, I saw it. Squatting by the evergreen tree, half in shadow, half in the light. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal either. Its skin was pale, no, more like a sickly tan, like worn leather. Its limbs folded wrong, too tightly. Its head was bald and smooth, ears pressed flat against its skull, eyes round and black like polished buttons. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It just crouched there, watching me. A wave of heat surged through me. My body burned from the inside out, my pulse pounding so violently I thought I'd pass out. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even blink. I just stared through that tiny patch of clear glass, praying I was imagining it. But it was real. Its eyes glistened under the light, reflecting nothing. Then, as my defroster cleared more of the window, I realized it was still there, perfectly still, as though carved into the earth. I slammed the car in reverse, gravel spitting out from under the tires. I didn't look back again. My headlights flickered over the tree for one last second before I sped down that dirt road at nearly 70 miles an hour. The last thing I remember was my heart trying to claw its way out of my chest, and then nothing. I don't even remember getting home. When morning came, the memories felt like a nightmare half remembered. But the fear was real, that crawling dread in my chest that wouldn't leave. I told myself it was exhaustion, maybe a shadow, maybe just my imagination playing tricks in the dark. But deep down, I knew what I saw. Still, I went back the next day. I had to. My friends laughed when I told them I saw something near the tree, until I told them it wasn't a person. When I described it, its folded ears, its strange color, the way it crouched, my friend's face drained of color. Her husband, overhearing from the hall, came in slowly and asked me to repeat what I saw. I did, word for word. When I finished, he nodded once and said quietly, "We've seen it too." He told me his dad, and his brother all saw it one night years ago, by that same tree. They called it the Golem, because it looked like something from a nightmare version of Lord of the Rings. That was the moment I stopped breathing for a second. Then, silence swallowed everything. After that, something inside me fractured. I stopped sleeping right. Every creak, every whisper of wind against my window pulled me back to that night. I tried to forget it, to bury it under excuses, stress, imagination, fatigue, but the memory was sharper than any dream. Weeks passed. My friends started walking me out every time I left late at night. None of us talked about the thing under the evergreen, but it was always there, in the silence between our words. In the way their eyes darted toward the window when the wind picked up. One night, about 2 months later, I decided I needed answers. I couldn't keep living with this uncertainty clawing at me. I dove deep into online forums, late-night threads, witness accounts, urban legends. I typed every word I could think of. Michigan creature, farmland watcher, hairless humanoid, forest demon. The more I read, the worse I felt, because people had seen it, or things like it. The term that kept appearing was Skinwalker. I'd never heard it before. It felt wrong to even read the word. I learned it came from Navajo folklore, an evil being that could shapeshift, mimic, deceive. The one who walks on all fours? I wasn't Navajo. I didn't want to disrespect their stories, but the description, it fit almost perfectly. Still, something didn't add up. What I saw didn't move like an animal. It felt alien, intelligent, in a way that made my blood run cold. Like it knew what I was and what I feared most. A week later, I went back to my friend's house during the day. I asked her to draw what I described. Her sketch was perfect, horrifyingly accurate. When she looked at me after finishing, I could see she was trembling. That night I dreamed of the farmland, the tree, the fogged glass, except this time I couldn't start the car. I could only watch as something crawled out from behind the evergreen, bones cracking, skin stretching, its black eyes glistening in the light until they locked with mine. I woke up screaming. From then on, strange things started happening. Sometimes I'd hear scratching outside my window at 3 a.m., not loud, faint, rhythmic like nails tracing the siding. Other times, the coyotes in the distance would fall completely silent. I'd lie there gripping my sheets, heart racing, waiting for something, anything, to happen. And sometimes I'd see movement just beyond the tree line. A flash of that same tan texture, a shape hunched low. Once, I swear I saw its reflection in my car window, standing behind me. But when I turned, there was nothing. It's been months since that night. I still visit my friends, but never after sunset. I understand. We all do.
That tree remains untouched.
The ground beneath it oddly bare. No grass, no weeds. Just soil that looks disturbed. I've thought about reaching out to a Native American shaman who runs a small shop nearby. But I've heard it's not something they like to talk about. You're not supposed to call it by name. They say it draws attention. Lately I've been dreaming again, the same scene, but different each time. Sometimes I'm frozen in my car, sometimes I'm outside it, and sometimes I'm the one crouching by the tree, watching someone else through fogged glass. I don't know if it's real or if it's burrowed into my head. But every time I close my eyes, I see those black button eyes reflecting the light. And sometimes, when the night wind rises just right, I swear I can hear breathing outside my window. Would you dare visit that farmland after dark? The wind scraped across the branches, dry and whispering like something alive. I still remember the smell of pine sap on my gloves that morning, sharp and clean, before everything went wrong. It was late October in the Indian Peaks wilderness, crisp, cold, and impossibly quiet. I'd come here for peace, a few days to hunt elk and clear my mind. After years in the military, I'd learned to find comfort in solitude. But that weekend, solitude found me first. I parked my truck near the trailhead, the early sun glinting off the frost that painted the windshield. 8 miles deep, I found my spot, a clearing ringed by black pines, a natural funnel for elk. By sunrise, I was 20 feet up in my blind, nursing coffee from a thermos, rifle balanced on my knee. The woods around me stirred with life, small scurrying sounds beneath the leaves, birds calling faintly through the mist. It was beautiful, serene. I could almost forget the things I'd seen overseas. Hours passed, and movement, a ripple of brown and gold across the meadow. A herd emerged, silent as ghosts. My heart steadied into the slow, practiced rhythm of the hunt, and then I saw him, the monarch. A massive elk antlers spreading wide, each side branching into 8 perfect points. I could feel the breath leave my lungs. This was the one hunters dream about. Click the safety off. The world narrowed to the space between his eyes. I pulled the trigger. Shot cracked across the meadow, echoing through the pines. The monarch fell instantly, clean and silent. The rest scattered in a blur of movement. I exhaled, a mix of triumph and relief, the kind of feeling that only comes from precision. One perfect moment between life and death. I climbed down, left my rifle in the tree, and started toward the meadow with my knife in hand. That small mistake would haunt me forever. Halfway there, I realized something was wrong. The forest had gone dead still. No birds, no wind. Even the echo of my boots on frozen earth sounded foreign, too loud, too heavy. After a gunshot, animals usually go quiet for a few minutes. But this, the silence felt ancient, heavy, like the woods were holding their breath. I could see the elk's body now, lying motionless in the tall grass. But something else caught my eye. On the far side of the fallen elk, another shape, larger, darker. I squinted through the gaps between the trees. It looked like another elk, lowering its head, nuzzling the dead one. At first I felt a flicker of guilt, maybe I'd just killed its mate. I took a few steps closer, whispering softly to shoo it away. It didn't move. Instead, it turned its head toward me. The way it looked at me, it wasn't curiosity. It wasn't fear. It was anger. sharp human anger. Its eyes were wrong, too round, too black. And as it stared, a cold weight settled in my chest. The same feeling I'd get when my commanding officer caught me doing something I shouldn't have. That sick, sinking guilt. I froze. My breath turned shallow. The elk lowered its head again, and then, in one fluid motion, stood up. At first, my mind couldn't process what I was seeing. Its limbs moved wrong, folding and straightening like something relearning how to walk. It rose higher, taller, and kept rising until it loomed over the carcass, a monstrous silhouette against the pale sky. The antlers remained, but the body beneath them was not animal. Pale skin stretched thin over long, human-like limbs. Knees bent backward, like an elk's hind legs. Its chest caved inward, ribs sharp and visible. And the head, that terrible, massive elk skull, sat crooked atop its shoulders. The antlers scraped against the branches, and beneath the bone something moved. I couldn't breathe. My feet felt cemented to the earth. It stared at me, through me, with that same black, glassy glare. Every instinct I'd ever had screamed run, but my body refused to obey. The forest felt smaller now, suffocating. Then, in one horrible second, its mouth, if that's what it was, opened. No sound came out, but I felt something push against my ears, my chest, my mind. Like pressure underwater, stomach twisted, my knees buckled. And then silence swallowed everything. Part 2, The Thing in the Pines, approximately 750 words. When I could finally move again, I stumbled backward, choking on my own breath. Ah! My boots crunched too loud against the dead needles. The thing didn't follow, it just watched. I took one more step, and then I ran. Branches whipped at my face, the forest blurring into streaks of black and brown. My rifle was still in the blind, but I didn't care. I didn't stop, not even when my lungs burned. The woods felt endless. Every shadow looked like it could break into that same tall, twisted shape. When I finally reached camp, I collapsed beside my tent, gasping. The silence had followed me. I waited, listened. Nothing. No birds, no wind. Just that thick electric emptiness pressing in on all sides. I wanted to pack up and leave right then, but the sun was already dipping low. There was no way I'd make it back to the truck before dark. So I did what soldiers do. I contained. Controlled what I could. Made a fire. Ate an MRE. Tried not to think about those black eyes. As night fell, the world shrank to the glow of my fire. Every snap of the wood made me flinch. I kept my rifle beside me now, safety off. I told myself it had to be some sick prank. A hunter in a mask, maybe. But even in my head, the logic fell apart. 10 feet tall? Backward knees? I couldn't explain the hatred I'd felt, the way the air had thickened around me. It wasn't fear, it was contempt. Hours dragged by. Around midnight, I must have drifted off. A noise woke me, faint, distant. A dragging sound, slow. Wet. My blood turned to ice. I reached for the rifle, finger trembling on the trigger. The sound came again, closer now, just beyond the tent wall. Then something brushed against the fabric. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. The tent bulged inward slightly, like a hand or something like it was pressing against it. The smell hit me next, rot, copper, and something else, like wet fur and decay. The pressure vanished as quickly as it came. The dragging continued, circling the tent once, twice, then fading into the trees. I sat there until dawn, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The moment the first light touched the sky, I tore down camp. I didn't even bother eating. Every few seconds, I looked over my shoulder, half expecting to see that towering figure standing among the trees. By the time I reached the blind, my rifle was still there, hanging untouched in the branches. I didn't stop, just grabbed it, slung it over my back, and ran. My legs felt hollow, my skin cold. When I finally saw the glint of my truck through the trees, something broke in me. A mix of relief and exhaustion so strong, I nearly sobbed. I never went back. Never hunted again. Even now, years later, I can still see it when I close my eyes. The way it rose from the earth, silent and hateful. Sometimes I dream of the woods, and I wake up to that same pressure in my chest, like it's still watching, still waiting. Maybe it wasn't a creature at all. Maybe it was something older, a guardian, a punishment, a curse for what I'd done. Maybe the forest just wanted me gone. Either way, I got the message. So if you ever find yourself alone in the Colorado wilderness and you hear the wind stop all at once, just remember, not everything out there forgives. Don't you dare return to that place.